So for the last week or so, I've been seeing stories float around on YouTube and the interweb in general, speculating about Marvel is going to race flip Professor X and Magneto. Right off the bat, from what I can tell from looking into this, the little extended amount that I did, I'm not going to say I went a full deep dive, but the impression I quickly got was that pretty much all this has sprouted out of a speculative article that is just making wild guesses and an opinion piece on what they think should happen, and using a few inferences for some quotes from a few of the producers and stuff at Marvel Studios to kind of create this case as to why they think this should happen. But there's nothing at all officially from the studios to any way indicate that this is ever going to be. In fact, from my own viewpoint, from stuff that Kevin Feige and other people at Marvel had said in the past, and their own pattern of how they've been going about making their properties, shows that this is not likely to be the case. They like to have their stuff based on comics. If they're going to have a radical change to one of those characters, they're not going to do that in movie. They're going to do that in the comics first, so that when it does happen in the cinema, to fans that are getting out the pitchforks and the torches, they can say, hey, look, we didn't just up and make Jane Foster Thor out of nowhere. We did it in the comics. Now, whether or not that was a cynical ploy in the first place is kind of besides the point. That's the pattern they're going through. So if they were to have a big change to the X universe where Magneto's black and Professor X is Hispanic or something like that, Professor Javier, the J-Men, they would do that in the comics first. And the X-Men have had enough goddamn reboots in the comics. Hopefully that's not going to end up being the case. But there are some arguments to be said that in the film universe, having Magneto in particular be a guy who was a kid in a concentration camp in World War II Germany, but now in the 2020s, which is by the time we'll see another X-Men movie hit theaters again, he's still around and kicking it and up to nefarious stuff when he's pushing 100. Yeah, that's not very realistic. And what really would be the other options? I do agree with the people who think it's a little hyperbolic to try to equate what black people went through during the civil rights struggle of the 60s to the Jews in the concentration camps of World War II. Not to say that what they didn't go through a struggle or they didn't have hardships or any of that kind of stuff, but there's a measurable difference in the kind of things that they were exposed to and subjected to, let us say. So having Magneto be an American black doesn't really quite work in my head. But I can see him being African black, and specifically Rwandan. The Rwandan genocide of the late 90s, time's up right. You can actually have a more youngish Magneto in his 30s and 40s, more Michael Fassbender age range for Magneto, have it be contemporary. And I think there's some angles that can be played with there about how not only just the horrors of the genocide and the larger tribe picking on the smaller tribe, all that kind of dynamics that were already there with Magneto as he is, but you can also play into the fact that the entire world just kind of shrugged and said, we don't really care when the whole Rwanda genocide thing was going on. I think that could add a layer of bitterness to a Rwandan Magneto. Also, you can give them overtones of the child soldier generals and stuff they have there. Basically, kind of make Magneto with a little bit of Coney 2012 mixed in. I think could be a good angle, because it's important to keep Magneto a villain. In some ways, the white Magneto is too sympathetic. Because his origin was being persecuted by Nazis of all things, and I don't know. Culturally, I find more and more people who tend to think of Magneto as the good guy and Xavier as the representative of the man, because he's trying to keep the system intact and because he wants to work peacefully and not just smash it all down. And so I think there should be some efforts done to keep Magneto where his motivations are still something you can understand and you can just feel a certain degree of sympathy to him. There are other aspects to him that are clearly villainous, to a point where, obviously, casual people, I kind of agree with his what he wants, but does he really have to be using a bunch of drugged up children mutants to do this kind of stuff? do something like that, and I think it could work out. No matter what, it's going to cause controversy at this point. Because this article has been written, if they cast a person of color to play Magneto, there's going to be a stink online about it. And if they don't cast a person of color to play Magneto, there's going to be a stink about it. I mean, and it's such just pure, just made up controversy that, like, anyone who's really just taking the time out of their day to sit in front of a camera and talk about this at all, let alone then take that footage and put it on the damn internet, they're just really wasting their time.